Hi, my name is John Jordan. I'm a woodturner from Cane Ridge, Tennessee, which is just outside Nashville. And I've been making my living as a woodturner for about the last 35 years. I went to school and was trained in electronics and worked for some bank equipment companies for about 16 years. And during that time, I got interested in woodworking and I built furniture for a while, thinking one day I might do that. And I got interested in wood turning, and one thing led to another. I was good at it. It suited me, and so I had applied for some craft shows and had gotten in. And the company that I worked for was rearranging, and so uh, they paid me several months and let me go, and I've been at this ever since. So I did the first craft show and made a little bit of money, and while the income was very much lower than it had been when I had a real job, I've managed all along by some selling my work, but also from the beginning. Uh, I started to teach, and I taught at a number of craft schools, and I travel and do demonstrations. And throughout my career, teaching has been a very instrumental part of that. I also am a tool maker. So when I travel and teach, I use specialty tools to make my little hollow turnings. And I make those here in my shop and sell those. So that's the short version of what I do.
What do you like about wood? What attracts you to
Well,
wood?
initially I don't know, but uh, like many people, certainly in the U.S., we took shop classes in what middle school, and so I had a good time playing in the shop class, and probably worked on the lathe a few days out of all my school time. So I'd made a couple of little things, but I got to wood after I was married. I got interested in making small, little precious boxes, jewelry box type things, just decorative boxes, and that's kind of where I began. And but wood as a material is just always interested me. Uh, After I got started doing some furniture and stuff, I got some logs and went to the sawmill, a little country sawmill here where they make lumber for barns and things like that, kind of utility sawmill, not really a furniture grade sawmill. But the first time I saw a log go down the saw and the side of that log fall off, and you could see the grain and stuff in the log, I was pretty hooked to wood as a material, and so I think I have a close connection with wood. I understand it. It's intuitive. Its properties are intuitive to me, and like I said, it's something very nice to work with. I do work in other materials. Also a metal worker. I work in steel primarily. Uh, but wood is my primary medium and what I like. So
What type of wood do you
I
prefer
don't
to
have
work with?
uh, necessarily preferences in the wood that I work. I do use local woods for the most part, and that are native to, well, most of the eastern United States. I use maple and cherry and walnut and ash and oak, woods like that. So most of those are familiar to people everywhere. They grow all over Europe and other countries as well. So most of those would be familiar to some variety of those would be familiar to most people. I do use wood that comes from other places occasionally because I have friends all over, and occasionally they'll send me some wood that suits me. I'm very particular. I work only with green wood, and it has to be fairly pristine. I'm not a wood person that uses the natural defects and knots and holes and fissures and bark and cracks and things like that. I really like the wood to be pristine and green, that is, in the condition that it was when it was cut. And so that narrows down the kinds of woods that I can use. But like I said, I do have people occasionally that'll send me something that's really special. And when I get some of those woods that are kind of rare to me, I'll wrap them up, and I have a freezer in my barn, and I keep the wood in a freezer, so it keeps it fresh and green until I can use it.
You functional woodwork and also ornamental wood.
Yeah, yeah. But really, all of my work is non-functional and decorative. It's I make an occasional bowl, and they certainly would be functional, but that's not my intention. I'm not making tableware or salad bowls and things like that, even though some of them could be used for that. That's not my intent. Most of the pieces are the hollow forms with carving, so they're purely decorative.
Do sketches? Do you do drawings, or you just
No, I rarely work from drawings. I occasionally sketch some ideas just to kind of keep them in my head, or so I don't forget them. But no, I don't draw a piece before I start, and I typically work in styles of pieces, if you will. So I know when I've cut the wood, generally the shape that I'm going to make and such. Now, a lot of people say, well, I wait and let the wood speak to me and blah blah blah. But I'm not much of a believer in that. I don't think the wood really. I think you need a plan when you start, and so I know generally what I'm going to make when I start, and I can respond to what emerges as I shape it, and sometimes will change my mind a bit, and occasionally will stop and get another piece of wood. If I'm really focused on doing a particular thing, I may sometimes stop and get a new piece of wood if I'm not happy with what's happening. But I don't draw, but like I said, I work it rather in series of styles. Now, very often what I do is I turn a lot of vessels or the forms, because that's relatively quick compared to the carving and the texturing that I do. And what might happen is I may make a whole group of vessels while I'm sort of in the mood to turn, and then afterwards I'll start working on the carving, which is much more labor intensive. And so I don't always know the surface treatments, the type of carving, and the final details like that until I actually get started on the carving. So I'm pretty flexible there as to what the piece is going to ultimately look like.
When you start a series, do you use the same model and do variations of the same model, or you do several shapes that are not related and they are part of the
Well, again, I work in I guess series is a fair word. I don't usually refer to them that way, but I guess they really are a series of work. And again, depending on the wood that I have, the shapes could be taller and slimmer, or they could be squat and low. They could be spherical, and so I could have different shapes, but with similar carvings and textures. So that would if you will, make a series or a common body of work, or it could be a series of similar shapes with different surface treatments. But my work's always recognizable. It's easy to relate one to another in almost all my work. I don't do huge varieties of things, and even though I do different things, one that's familiar with this kind of work will immediately recognize the things that I do.
You are also a metal worker. How do you combine metal and wood?
Well, I've yet to combine the metal and wood in the ways that I hope to one day. I've kind of learned the metal skills, separate from wood. Like I said, I like to work in steel, and so I have ideas and some things that I want to do that will feature the metal more alongside the wood. But what I currently do, most of the metal work that I incorporate with the wood is I do a series of little lidded jars or containers, and they will have steel lids that are the steel lids are hammered much like silver or copper would be, which they would in that case call that raising. So they'll have raised or hammered lids, and then some of the pieces that I make will have metal handles, and so they'll be the metal handles will be forged out to go with the steel lid. So it'll have a metal handle with a steel lid, and I have some pictures of those.
Interesting that today's generation understands wood.
Oh, that's a difficult question. I don't know, since we as far as household items and utilitarian wood objects, we certainly don't depend on those anymore. On the other hand, there's a lot of interest currently in wood furniture in particular. I know a lot of people have become interested in the salvage of urban wood. That's very popular here in the United States now, where they'll recover urban trees that have to be cut for construction or maybe have blown down. We had a big tornado here 2 years ago. Well, not 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, just before the pandemic closed everything down, and it really destroyed some significant parts of Nashville. And there were a lot of trees down there, and a lot of those have been recovered and turned into furniture, or are in the process of being turned into furniture. So, and those would be primarily going to relatively young people. So I think there's an understanding of wood like that. We have doesn't really have anything to do with my work, but of course right now the prices of wood have increased sometimes 300 and 400%, and so building here right now has been very affected by that. Like I said, it doesn't have much to do with what I do, but I think people are still aware of wood.
You said that you loved wood to be pristine. Do you get commissions to restore wood pieces?
Rarely would I do something like that. People get in touch occasionally, but I'm not a repair person. I'm not interested in trying to restore, say, an antique chair that needs wood-turn parts or something. That's just not what I do. So it would be pretty rare that I would do something on a commission to repair something. In fact, I had work damaged in an earthquake a number of years ago, and we actually had them repaired by a restorer rather than do it myself, which was kind of odd to me, but that happens. Mostly everything I make, it would be on speculation, and occasionally I have requests, and I don't always want to take a commission necessarily, but if someone is interested in a certain kind of piece, I'll keep them in mind. And if I can make something that will suit them, then that's good. But I've found that if I take a commission, very often, people want me to make something that I've made in the past, and I don't know. It just doesn't always work. I feel like sometimes I've made an older piece to make them happy, and I don't always want to do that. So this my career is that commissions have never really worked, and I'm occasionally envious of people that talk about commissions and they got a commission for this sculpture or they got a commission for these major pieces and so forth. But that's never been a big part of what I do.
What are you working on right now?
Right now, well, at this minute, not very much. I've been making tools. The last year I've not been very productive. I had a liver transplant about 15 months ago, just a couple of weeks before the pandemic locked things down here. So the year was pretty interesting, and I didn't work a lot. I kept up with the tool making, and I carved some pieces, but I didn't turn a lot. And so I'm just now getting back to work. I got a nice big fresh log this past week, and I'm going up to the log yard this week to get some new wood. So I hope to have a productive summer and make a fairly major collection of work.
So let's talk about the tools. What kind of tools do you do?
Well, as you know, most of the pieces that I make are hollow vessels, which have relatively small openings, and it requires a special tool to work through that small opening to remove the bulk of the wood inside the vessel. The vessels are not very thick after they're finished, and so all of that wood has to be removed from the inside through a small hole. It's not like a clay vessel where the walls of the vessel are pulled up and then closed over after the walls are sort of shaped. So it can be difficult, and particularly if you don't have the right tools. So I developed a line of tools that do what I want to do and what I needed to teach. That was a primary motivation for making the tools, is I needed tools for my students, and there was really nothing available. I'd made my own tools, and so I started making them. I didn't set out to be a tool maker, but that's become a large part of my business. It certainly helps when the sales of finished pieces and turnings are not as good as I would like, but the tool business is consistently steady. So I designed these tools to do exactly what I wanted. They're simple and very effective, and I do quite well with them.
Let's talk about your teaching. What do you
Well,
teach?
I started teaching, I think I mentioned at the beginning, early on in my turning career. There's a fairly well-known craft school just about an hour from where I live, and they let me teach some weekend classes there. So I started doing classes for Saturday and Sunday. And back then I would teach, beginning woodturners, people that had never turned. And that these days I try to avoid teaching beginners, because there are a lot of people that can teach the basics, and I prefer to teach more advanced techniques. I've got a lot to offer in that range. So I teach the hollow turning, and I teach and then I do a lot of work with carving and texturing and that sort of thing. Again, that's what I'm really known for, and that's what people are interested in me showing them. This past year, well, since the pandemic and my health issues, I had a very busy 2020 scheduled. I would have been traveling half the year, and of course, I didn't do a single one of those workshops. They were all canceled, and 2021 is going to be about the same. Even though things are opening up, and you know, we're able to move around and do some things here in the country. Some workshops are opening up, but I don't have anything scheduled this year either. What I've been doing this past year is I started in the fall is I'm doing remote demonstrations from my shop here. I bought cameras and computers and all the equipment I need to do lessons or typically large group demonstrations over Zoom. The very first one I did was for our American Association of Woodturners, and we had, I think, 1,800 people watching. So I started out with a fairly large audience. Typically, the ones I teach will have 50, 60, 70 people and last a couple of hours. So that's kind of the way of the future, and it's going to take the place of some of the in-person demonstrations, I'm afraid. And in some ways, that's a good thing. It reduces the expense to the groups that host the demonstrator. There's no travel and that, but it's not the same as being in person. And honestly, I've really been missing. I enjoy the travel. I like taking a road trip, and you know, America is a beautiful country, and so I like to drive when I can. I'm really tired of flying these days, and so I drive to most of my demonstrations, and I can stop and sightsee and just enjoy the trip, and I enjoy interacting with the people when I do the demonstrations or teach the classes, and I miss that a lot. And I don't know when I'll get to go out of the country again. The travel is really restricted that way, so we'll see.
You've been traveling in many countries. Can you talk about that?
I have. I've been to France a number of times, and I've always enjoyed that. There are some very good French turners, and they've hosted. I've done everything from 2-week classes to weekend demonstrations to well, all sorts of things there. So I've enjoyed France. I haven't really traveled in Europe much outside France, and many trips to the UK. I've been all over the UK, from the north of Scotland to down all the way down south. And I've been to Ireland a number of times, Northern Ireland, as well as Ireland. Many trips to Australia. I really enjoy going to Australia and New Zealand, and Asia only once. I've been to Japan one time. I regret not having been there more. Canada a lot, of course, and probably some others. They said, I don't know when COVID's going to allow travel to resume to other countries, so I don't know how much of that's in my future right now. The basic safety things for wood turning is you know, personal protection when you work. It as a beginner, some things could be dangerous to you, but we wear face shields and ear protection when necessary. And sometimes you need hearing protection. Many times you don't, but sometimes you do. And of course, protecting your lungs. The way I work, I don't make a lot of dust, but there are many forms of wood turning where there's a lot of sanding, or if people are turning dry wood, where it's much dustier. And so we need lung protection, and in the form of dust mask or respirators and various forms of dust collection at the lathe and in your shop. So I have a well ventilated shop with dust collection. And again, the way I work, I don't generate a lot of dust. But of course, there's sharp tools and spinning wood and probably the biggest danger is people that are trying to get started and they use poor quality wood. They like the look of some chunk of driftwood looking stuff or firewood or wood with multiple defects, and those can cause problems. The wood can come apart and you could get hit by a piece and things like that. And then very often people turn too fast. So the speed of the lathe can be dangerous. So we try to teach people about that. But inherent dangers to one who has learned the basics, it's not a particularly dangerous occupation or avocation or hobby. But again, I like working with green wood, and that reduces some aspects of working with wood.
Working with green wood, does this mean that you have to start working with it as soon as possible?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that, and that goes back to, I believe, what you asked me before, and this will make a little more sense. What people consider the problems associated with wood turning and things like I do is people assume that there are all sorts of problems associated with turning greenwood. And there are if one doesn't understand the material. Yeah, and those problems are typically cracking of the green wood and distortions of the pieces that you're turning. That is, they will warp and twist again and crack. And all of those problems are caused by the drying of the wood. Well, I understand how that works, and so I do like the wood to be relatively fresh. Now, when I say green wood, I can keep a log. We're working with fairly large logs, so we keep the wood in the log until it's time to use it. And so, rather than cutting up a large log into the size pieces I need to turn on the lathe, I only cut one or two pieces at a time off the log, and I'll keep the log possibly covered up, maybe with a tarp or something. But the log will dry very slowly inside, and while the ends of the logs and the surface may dry up a bit, the wood will stay green inside, particularly if you keep it covered with a tarp or keep it in the shade. But dealing with the green wood is probably the biggest problem people have when they don't understand it. But that's one of the things that I teach, and one of the favorite parts of what I do. But it's no problem for me, and it's really not very complicated to understand the things you need to do to avoid problems with green wood. As I said, sometimes people send me some special wood, and I'll wrap that and keep it in my freezer, which keeps the wood, just the same as it was the day we cut it. So that's an example of things I need to do with the green wood to keep it green. And I have a lot of waste in the wood that I use. I don't worry about and don't need to use every bit of the log that I bring home. Because the logs are generally salvaged in the first place and would have been at best firewood. Probably they would have been ground into mulch or just buried. So I don't feel guilty about not using all the wood. And so what I can do is I can cut into the log and waste a little bit to get into the part of the log that's still wet or green.
About wood turning, you need to be aware of how fast you turn. How long does it take to master these skills?
Well, it Woodturner, it's not the most complicated thing in the world, but you know, some people have a natural you know, affinity for it. Some natural ability. We all have abilities in certain things, you know, that we're just naturally pretty good at, and then you need to practice. So some people can learn it in very short order, but yeah, one can be a competent woodturner in a relatively short time, you know, and so someone that's been turning a year, if they practice, can be a pretty good woodturner. It's not difficult to make the kinds of pieces that I make. If you have a little bit of uh, talent toward, you know, toward that, the uh, some people that I teach are not so naturally inclined, so it's a little bit harder. But if they're willing to you know, practice, it's very easily doable by the average person. I often talk about it's kind of like playing guitar. I'm a an amateur musician. I don't play very much these days, but the problem is I don't want to practice. I just want to be able to do it. So, and when I do play, rather than kind of concerted practice, I just kind of noodle around, and so I never get particularly better. I'm kind of stuck where I am, and the same thing for wood turning. If one just, you know, kind of plays around at it here and there, you're not going to progress very much. But with a little intentional practice, it's not a terribly difficult skill to get competent at. It's you know, the things that separate, I suppose, people like myself and people that are fairly well known for doing this is the years of just doing it over and over and over again. Those years show. The experience shows that attention to detail and and things that are difficult to describe uh, show after, you know, after several decades of working. And I see that in all of my peers, you know, people that are not just woodworkers, but potters and metal artists and I'm sure it's true in any version of the arts that you can't shortcut your way, you know, to those years of experience, and those things show. And so while somebody might be pretty good, like I said, they're wood turners that in a year or two are really making nice work. And but what's exciting is they really want to continue with that. I want to see what they do in 10, 20, and 30 years. Starting out with you know, already making good work, when they've got that experience behind them, it really makes a difference. And that's the stuff that's I think the people that people really enjoy seeing is that work from people that have a lot of experience.
Your sculptures are primarily indoors. Do you also make outdoors
I don't
sculptures?
know. I would. We talked about commissions. I would certainly entertain commissions to do some outdoor pieces. I've always kind of wanted to do some pieces like that. I don't want to change necessarily what I do, but I would be open to it. But I have not at this point done any outdoor sculpture.
Your sculptures, for example, are they required, let's say, maybe invited to be shown in museums or in schools?
Things have changed in the last, you know, the last 10 years. Probably think things have changed a bit. The galleries, a lot of my work is headed to galleries, and the galleries have kind of gone away. At least the traditional galleries that I always worked with. But typically, you know, pieces would be made for shows of some sort. It might be a museum exhibition. It might be a wood turning specific exhibition. I might be doing a show in a gallery. So, you know, those things were always planned out months and years in advance. So for most of my career, that's kind of how I worked. I would have things scheduled, for months out, and I'd be working toward that particular show or exhibition or museum show, that sort of thing. And those have changed a lot. There are not a lot of exhibitions. I think I have one exhibition or two exhibitions this year, and that'll just be for a piece or two. So I don't have any major shows where there'll be groups of work now. So that's one reason I've not made as much the last year or two, is they're just not very much scheduled. And I don't get out and I don't do shows, and without galleries to represent me, there's not a lot of motivation for me to produce like I once did. And so I still like what I do, and I still make, and I still try to improve what I make. But I've not adapted probably very well to the 21st century and online marketing and that sort of thing. My sales largely come now from people that get in touch with me, and they'll be direct sales. I hope we have some exhibitions here in the next year or two that kind of pick things up. But I'm always open if anybody if anybody would like a show. I'm certainly making work and could do that. I couldn't do what I do without Vicki. She doesn't directly work on any of my work, but she does everything else. A one-person wood turning business can generates a lot of paperwork, and it's more complicated than one would initially think. So she does all of the taxes and insurance and all of the business stuff. Of course, we sell tools over the internet, so doing all of the tool orders and that sort of thing. I have a low tolerance for that stuff myself. I'd probably be in trouble if I had to do it all myself. So she takes care of all the paperwork. She does our website, all of those sorts of things that enable me to make work and do what I do here. And she'll help around the shop. She comes down, and when I have a demonstration, she comes down and helps me sort of tidy up. I'm a neat person in my work habits and in my shop. I have everything's organized and relatively neat and clean, but she likes to come down and sort of help me do a better clean. She'll make it look nice for the cameras and stuff. So all of those things are really important to me. Or if I've gone off teaching for a couple of weeks, she'll come down and tidy up the shop a bit. So when I get home, it's nice to come home to that rather than a place that's a little messy. So I appreciate her greatly.
Do you have plans for post-COVID
Well,
times?
we touched on that a little bit. I hope that maybe later this year and certainly next year I can resume traveling again and doing in-person demonstrations or workshops and classes, and then we'll see. Hopefully, it will also open up some exhibition possibilities. But I think people, I think we just still don't know. And like I said, I don't know about traveling back to Europe and Australia and places again right now. The travel restrictions are, I don't know, I think here to stay for a good while. And so I'm not real optimistic about traveling out of the country, but I do hope that I'll be able to resume traveling here in the States and teaching. I don't know how that will affect my making work, but like I said, I plan to have a productive summer here and I've gotten started on new work. So I hope it's going to be a good year, and then if there will be somewhere I can actually show that work. My basic philosophy is to keep things simple. Even though people consider my work to be elaborate in its technical in the technical aspects of it, it's really not complicated. And like I said, I'm a minimalist in the tools that I use. I'm a minimalist in the processes that I use, and so the simpler the better in almost everything that I do. And I'm a simple guy, and so the tools that I use are straightforward and simple. The pieces that I make are in many ways relatively simple. The attention to detail, I think, is what makes them different. But my overall philosophy, yeah, would be keep it simple. Yeah.
Do you think we should go back to minimalism?
Oh, no. I don't mean that at all. I just I've certainly got one foot in the modern age. I enjoy the technology. Like I said, I've been now I can teach people around the world right here from my little studio, and the technology makes that possible. No, I'm definitely not anti-technology. We have electric cars, and things like that, and we're computers and phones, and I love all that stuff. It's just that the work that I do, it doesn't. I don't advocate going back to necessarily old ways or anything like that. I use my lathes are benefit from technology. I use state of the art wood lathes, and while they don't differ much from what we had 100 years ago, the advent of technology has certainly made them better. And so, no, I love technology, but people can try to apply a lot of things to things like wood turning that are just not necessary. So we don't need a lot of technology, and so there are people that try to make it complicated with technology, and the simple part is well, I'm just rambling here. I'm not making a good point, but the process is still pretty simple, and we don't need technology to improve the process of wood turning. But technology allows me to now, rather than taking slides, for example, of my work, the transparencies and images have been the currency of our business for decades and decades. Well, now with I can take pictures with my iPhone or with my digital camera, and I can manipulate those images and have much better, clearer images than I could have gotten 20 years ago, when I had to shoot a roll of transparencies and then go, and it was expensive, and then you go and you get the transparencies from the processor, and 2/3 of them you just throw away. And so technology helps a lot, but not directly in the making of the things that I do. But there are probably people doing some pretty incredible things using computers and things, but I don't do that. But I'm certainly not an advocate for going back to the way it used to be. I'm not promoting that.
Well, then you certainly adjusted very well to the 21st century, because you bridge technology and minimalistic art techniques very well. You learn to take the best from both sides.
That's a fair statement, I think. Yes.
Do you feel that in the future technology will become more intrusive, more invasive into arts?
I think it already is in many mediums. Like I said, in wood turning, I'm not sure that it's how it will affect it. but many people are working, you know, with computer printing, the 3D printing and things like that, and people designing their work on computers. And you know, I think there's a lot of areas where technology really, you know, does some exciting stuff. But that's a little far from me. But I think it will continue to impact things. So, and I'm again, I'm not anti-technology, and I think it can make some can enhance and has a lot of possibilities for new kinds of work. Does it affect my wood turning? No, it doesn't affect me directly in the wood turning part of it. But I think, yeah, I can't imagine right now what, say, the next decade will be like in the arts in general, because computers and technology are going to, you know, continue to impact things. And there's a lot of exciting stuff. But I'm just a basic wood turner, and that stuff's a little beyond me. I'm not smart enough uh, to have to know really where that's going to go, but it's exciting.
How can people find you?
I'm pretty easy to find. If you just typed in John Jordan in Google, you'd find me that way. But my website is johnjordanwoodturning.com. My Instagram is at John Jordan Woodturning. I'm fairly active on Instagram, and you can see I always have current work and things that I'm working on Instagram. I've enjoyed talking with you. I think I don't have much to add here now. I've enjoyed it.